In today's episode, we talk about the awe in design. We talk about AI in education and teaching with and without AI in the classroom. Stay tuned. Welcome to the AI Lab Unfiltered podcast, where we take a deep dive into everything AI. I am Drew Veach from BizStream and joined by Mr. Pete Tarrin from New Wave.
Thank you for having me.
First, a big shout out to Think Tank Thought Leadership. They are powering us. They produce us. They handle all our social. They handle everything podcast related. This entire studio that we're sitting in, they handle everything, editing on down. And if you're thinking about doing a podcast, they are the people to talk to. I would encourage you, even if you're thinking about doing one, talk to these guys. Give them a shout out. Talk to them, just see what they can do for you, because they will find all the gaps and they will encapsulate it all into one big package for you and make it successful. That's my commercial pitch. I
just thought of something too. So there's also it's really cool to tell people you have a podcast, and I highly encourage it. So I need to confess something. So I started this thing where, because I have the YouTube app on my TV. So when you walk into our house, our living room is right there. So as people are coming over, I'll go to the YouTube app and I'll start playing our podcast. And when people walk into my house, they're like, "Is that you?" I'm like, oh yeah, that's just my podcast.
So we're apparently doing this to stroke Pete's ego. All right.
That's basically my entire life, is feeding my ego.
I'll help you. And with that, let's talk about our guest.
Speaking of podcasts,
today we have Lindsey Peterson, Assistant Professor of Graphic Design and User Experience at Grand Valley State University, and also podcast host of In a Glimpse podcast. Want to talk about designing empathetic AI experiences. Design is what you know a ton about. I'm really excited about this because we haven't had anybody on talking about design about this. So, and you're Grand Valley alum right here. Tell me about where the design crossover, where you see the biggest impact, where you see that awe moment.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and one I get a lot. When people hear that I'm studying and looking into awe, usually the follow-up is, what does that have to do with design? Which is a great question.
Yeah.
And I would say that there's two lenses that can come through. That's the lens of, are you seeking to generate awe for a user and an audience, for them to have this moment of amazement and delight and joy from an experience that's created? Or are you, as the designer, seeking to have awe in your life and utilize what comes from those experiences to better create and design for those audiences? So those are two different ways to look at it. Probably the most common way it gets talked about is, can we experience awe from a designed experience? There's a lot of thoughts on that, which I'm sure we'll be diving into, and I'd love to hear your guys' perspectives as well. I'm honestly looking at it a bit more from how designers can use it within creative processes and to collaborate better because of these experiences that enable us to have greater pro-social mindsets.
Interesting. Okay, that's something I wanna jump into right now.
Great.
Explain what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I have a question for you guys, if I can. Maybe this is the podcast host coming out. But before I explain that, I would love to ask what awe means to each of you, so that I don't influence perhaps your definition before I explain some things a bit further.
Do we have to constrain it to any area?
No, just in awe, general. Awe, when you hear the word awe, what does that mean?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I guess I still see it from a design aspect, just my marketing background influencing it, but in design where it's bringing out those unique qualities, something that makes you stop and think about it, like gives you pause, because it's something that your brain is processing in a delightful way. This is my professor description. That stands out, that makes you stop and think, gives you kind of pause to it. That's that awe moment. That's that, there it is. That's cool.
I was going to say something very similar. The idea of...
Don't steal mine.
No copy.
I asked you if you wanted to go first. I could have said it. But yeah, I don't know, how do you explain that moment of pause to there's just something that happens internally where whatever you were thinking about stops. Whatever was going on in that moment stops, and you're totally focused in on whatever that experience is. It could, my mind instantly goes to like visual, but it could be an audible awe, like you could hear something for the first time and you're just blown away by, what that sound is. I think it's more for me, it's usually like a visual. I think of like, we're just in the UP for vacation, like a sunset on the lake, or, some part of the wilderness, or the Sioux, the Tequamanen Falls, or you just like, wow. And you just pause and everything does stop. Yeah, I think that's a good way
Yeah, I love both of your responses in regards to pausing, because it's those moments. The cognitive definition in the cognitive sciences is an experience of vastness, whether physical or conceptual, that results in accommodation. So that means our mental models have to expand, or we have to generate a new model. We're not assimilating that experience. So there's this quality that we're reflecting and trying to understand and comprehend what's going on. And that in and of itself has been studied to produce prosocial qualities, to get back to your question, in regards of fostering greater levels of generosity, empathy, humility, collective thinking, etc. And that, to me, is where great power can be leveraged within design and creative teams and processes, because we're designing for other people. We are trying to create these systems that embed and consider a large amount of users, and to really empathize. That's hard to do, to truly empathize with every user that's going to be like hitting that design touch point. You can do your best, but whenever we're pursuing mindsets of collectivism and mindsets that are just more open in general, we're going to be closer to being able to do that to a wider spread audience.
It elicits that emotional experience is what I'm getting out of that a lot too, which I think is a huge part of good design, is that it does bring that. It's almost like art, where it gives you that pause. It gives you that I can connect with this, and this is why.
Absolutely.
This triggers so many things, that's going on. That's what I think is the epitome of it.
Yeah, design it's an interesting space, because when we're in user experience, good design is often the design that's unnoticed, is what they say.
Yeah.
You don't want to be thinking about, how do I get to my shopping cart? How do I reorder a prescription? How do I do X, Y, Z?
Yeah.
You just kind of want to flow and know you feel intuitively, but that's strategy on the design team, right?
Yep.
They're guiding you through a series of touch points and cues within the design of where to go and where to lead you. But then there's spaces like in branding of a product that you want this allurement, you want this wow factor, you want this experience to feel heightened, and like someone to stop and be, whoa, that's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that. I want to be in this brand tribe. Nike does that really well. Nike, I think for decades has been a leader within just really positioning their products through their brand system as a leader of like, maybe I'm not an athlete, but I want to wear those shoes because that looks cool. You know?
I've always equated it to Harley Davidson, which I know has been having a hard-ish time lately, the past probably 5-10 years, but everybody knows their brand. Everybody, and it's so like Nike, where you just see the symbol, you know exactly what it is. People get it tattooed,
right?
I mean, and people want to be that. I'm not necessarily in a motorcycle gang, but I'm in a weekend warrior, and I can drive my motorcycle, and I have that feeling, that emotion that all comes with it.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the larger of the power in brand design is you belong to something,
right?
And you want to belong to something. And that does directly tie to larger just human awe experiences, because it allows us to see how we belong to the larger system of this world, to consider I'm really small. I'm not insignificant in a bad way,
right?
But I'm insignificant in the regards of it's not just about me. I get taken out of my own little world, and I can see I belong to this larger system of life. And those those are two ends of that spectrum of belonging, but they're tethered directly and really important for us to engage with as consumers.
Exactly. So, okay. So now, sorry, I could go on and on, like talking about design.
Please.
Strictly. So tying in AI to this, you mentioned something earlier about you see it as more of a way to communicate with design. Explain that. Are you talking like the design process? Are you talking about the end design with the end user? Like, where do you see that fitting in?
Where do I see AI specifically?
Yeah, where do you see that being leveraged, I guess, in there?
Oh, yeah. Definitely in design processes, we see this already. I mean, it is quickening workflows in areas. I predominantly use a program called Figma and teach that. And their new Figma Make AI-driven prompt series is pretty remarkable. It's something I have to consider as an educator, right? How do we use this in the classroom appropriately? And where is it needed? Where is it not? So there's spaces, I think, as a practitioner, like that's super useful to be building wireframes and low fidelity prototypes for clients to get these like quick revisions out. And then your energy can be focused upon concept development, ensuring there's meaning within this process, in that user flows and digital spaces are smooth, like I was mentioning earlier. That you have to test, you have to spend time. But I do think AI can allow you to get through some of the processes that can be quicker. You can get through them faster, and then you can spend the time that you gain in the areas that you need to talk with people and to test.
Yeah, definitely. That's how we're using it too, the same way. I mean, Figma is just such a powerful tool, platform, specifically for websites.
Yeah, it really is. It's remarkable what you're able to do. I do think, though, it's important to consider when you need it versus when you don't. Because, it's just because you can doesn't mean you should always.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot as an educator with students. And I was just saying this before I came in here. There's times that I'll teach my students shortcuts and programs. And there's times that I'm not teaching them that until way later because they have to understand every step of the process.
Smart,
to be able to identify when something breaks, what broke. If we're taking shortcuts and we're skipping steps, we might get to an end result. But if something's not working, how do we know how to identify it?
Yeah. Like, here's how to troubleshoot it. Here's the theory and how that gets built up into your end result. But here's a shorter way to get to it. Now you understand how that was built.
And perhaps why AI is making the decisions it is. Why is this a good design that AI is producing for me? And why is it not? What makes this work or not work from a visual standpoint? There's a lot of psychology in design, right? Of how we're curating visuals, of what we're leading the user to engage with first, second, and third. And I think that there is opportunity for AI to enhance that. But students, especially, and young designers have to learn how to identify those ideas first.
Yep. Sorry, Pete. Did you want to be part of this?
If you're rolling, keep going. I'm loving it. I like Design Drew. I didn't know that this was a thing for you.
I can't design in the traditional sense. Like, I'm not a graphic designer by any means. I know what I like. I know what I don't. And I know some good design principles. Like, I know how to critique it. I don't know how to do it, I guess. But I love working with designers, and I have really my entire career in some fashion. I've always worked with designers fairly closely, and in marketing, obviously, you're tied to design. So
absolutely,
but just good design is so critical. It's so critical. If you have a question, go ahead.
I guess it's going to end up being a question. Just in sitting here, just kind of forming this thought. So bear with me. We think about AI adoption, and there are, people like Drew and I that were very early drawn to the very early versions of it, which is just, there's a little chat text box and you either talk to it or put some chat in there and it responds. For you and I, we had that awe experience then. there are still the majority of people either haven't used it or they've used it once and they're still not using it because they're not connected. They haven't had that awe moment that's drawn them in. And I'm just wondering if that's where the adoption curve is low for people, because they're just not, I don't know this, they're not technically getting it. I don't think that's it, because it's natural language. It's just like talking to a person. So there's not that high barrier technically, but they're just not getting it. And I'm wondering if it's because you think about ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, it's still that little chat box in the bottom and it's text. Some of these other tools like a Lovable or Figma, where it's more graphical and in what you're getting as output. I'm wondering if that's where these frontier AI companies need to get to, is something that's more awe-inspiring for the rest of the people out there, that to really draw them in to where they're like, they have that moment and then they're like, okay, now I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually was just reading this week an article that was talking about when GPT-3 came out, I believe it was in 2020, that how there was not really a lot of mass traction around using AI, how we maybe see and think of people integrating it or starting to today. And it wasn't until in like 2021, 2022, specifically when ChatGPT was coming out, that the interface was changed a bit, right? The interface was changed, and this gets into UX and user experience, to be more conversational, to be wrapped in this approachable, engaging ability to chat like a human, as you said. That then we saw people starting to take this next step of, what is this thing? Can I just like type something and what happens? Which is how I started too. I'm I have to be honest, for how embedded in tech professionally I am. Personally, I'm like probably the lowest tech person you can be. And that's intentional. That's for a reason. But I'm a pretty slow adopter, not because I'm scared, but because I want to understand and I want to use technology thoughtfully in my life and in my career. And so I was kind of like, what happens when I do this? And then I'd let it rest, and then I'd come back and, get a little more advanced and build. But I do think there's a lot of language out there that feels scary to people about like, AI is going to take over the world. And knowledge is power. So if you have knowledge about how it works and how, like, what the outputs are, that can help you be more comfortable. You don't have that knowledge, it can feel really scary of like, what is this thing that can do pretty amazing things, but I don't know about it. So I'm just gonna pause.
Yeah. Who knows? I don't know. I was just thinking about it. You gave me a moment, so I just took it. I was just talking.
Oh, so you deal a lot with some AR, VR systems as well, correct? Tell me about some of the design and the AI in there that, I mean, not just like in a technical sense, but like how it's used to really bridge that to make it more impactful.
Yeah, I will say I don't personally, my expertise area is not in creating VR simulations, but with research I've done and also colleagues who that is their area, VR especially is a great place where threading empathy back into this, that there's great opportunity for empathy building to take place. And there's a lot of researchers in design starting, if they haven't already, starting to investigate this and how you can enable classes to, travel to another country and look at what an area looks like post a war. How is that experience for someone who lives there? If you've never had that experience, that can be a really impactful and immersive way to seek to build empathy with that demographic and audience. And so there's lots of examples like that happening and emerging right now. I think where AI, in my personal opinion, is going to elevate this is allowing it to be more realistic. In VR simulators, there is this wow factor because you're fully immersed, but you're also aware that it's not real. It's very digitized and I don't want to say cartoonish. That's not the right term,
right.
But animated.
Low
maybe.
fidelity.
Yes, thank you. Low
Yeah.
fidelity. And so I think AI, with what we're seeing with video generation right now and the realism that's going to elevate these experiences in an immersive way that I think can be very powerful. Also can be dangerous, perhaps too, but
Right.
can be very powerful.
I have a Quest 3. I'm a VR lover. And there are experiences that you can get off the marketplace where you can go to a post-war area and in this 360 kind of view. But then when you talk about elevating that with AI, now what if there was a member of that community that was an AR avatar that I could start to talk to,
Right.
and that avatar is versed in the history of that space and what happened there, and now you're just not getting that visual interaction. Now you're actually having a conversation there and really getting immersed in what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with a colleague at Grand Valley about opportunities to integrate this into the classroom. I teach a design research course, and with the constriction of a semester, we can't always go out and do multiple interviews. We try, of course, to do a couple out in the community or with whatever topic that we're talking about. But we were starting to explore how can we use VR where it is and where it's going to be to elevate the classroom experience for students and bring them opportunities to exercise empathy building, because it's a really important part of the creative process. But time and money and budgets and clients are always, the hustle of every industry fights against that. And I think that it brings me back to how you both described awe, is those moments of pause. Those are so important in life.
Yeah.
But we are having less and less of them, which is hard to balance out.
Do you think that's because everything's getting so quick to the draw? It's so, like using AI because it's so much quicker that not only is there, I would argue that there's definitely less thought put into it by a human. Obviously, that's the AI speeding it up, but because there's so much of it, that bar keeps getting raised at the same time of that awe moment versus 20 years ago where you didn't have that tech, where so many more, it feels like there were so many more, there's so fewer that made it more important to have those awe moments.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the constant development of a distracted mind. There's always distractions in life. Before tech there was, but we have access to, constant notifications, constant news cycles. It's not the days where the only time I heard the news was when the paper was delivered once a day at 5 p.m.
Right.
That's a really different, right? To have this constraint to information versus to not. There's pros and cons, of course, to both.
Sure.
But I think something that we see happening and has happened and is very well researched is the entanglement of tech and integration of tech in our lives is a good thing. That it allows us to be efficient, it allows us to work and communicate and have access. But if we're not conscious of the ways it's changing our connection to one another, our pace in which we work, then the disentanglement of it in areas becomes harder. It becomes harder to step back and pause.
Yeah.
It becomes harder to keep my attention and my focus on reading a book or reading a print newspaper or reading something. And so we see this, it's called attention fragmentation within the research happening a lot, where it's just constantly shifting from one thing to the other. And that makes it harder to have those moments of pondering.
I'm going to ponder right now.
Yeah, ponder.
Do you see that in the classroom a lot? Do you see with the students where it's, I don't want to dumb it down to 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, but do you see that? We can talk about it with social media too, how it makes it that much more fractional, like you said. But even with AI, where, I can just get this done a lot quicker now because I can just use AI. I like your idea of, I'm going to show you essentially the manual way, the old school tried and true. This is so because your brain thinks every step in there. and then I can show you how to do that quicker.
Yeah. I tell the students too, I say, I am going to show you the long and hard way. And I'm going to ask you to do it that way and to show me evidence that you've done it that way.
So you
But
say that
here's
right up
why.
front.
Oh, I say it the first
wow.
day. I say it
Okay.
the first day because I've been a student. You're sitting there thinking, are you giving me busy work? I don't want to do that. So I'm going to find the shortcut. But what I found is when students understand why you're asking something of them, they're much more motivated to go through the process and to struggle through parts that are longer and harder. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. If I could, a quick moment, because I know this wasn't part of what we're planning on talking about, but AI in education is something that we've talked about a lot. Mm-hmm. And you're describing what I've kind of envisioned as how we can handle AI in education, which is, I don't care what tools you use, as long as you can describe to me how everything worked behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And instead of it being where I turn in an assignment to you and you just grade it, you and I sitting across from each other and I'm explaining the answer to the problem and showing that I have knowledge of that topic versus just turning something in.
Right.
Because AI is going to make it so easy to make it look like I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I can answer any quiz, I can turn in papers and not know anything about the topic. But you're already kind of ahead of the game, it sounds like. You're saying, I know there are shortcuts. I'm going to show you the long and hard way to use your term, and then you're going to describe it back to me in that way so that you can prove to me that you actually understand the topic. So we can switch off of that, but I'm encouraged that you're doing that because I think that's the right way to go about it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a hard topic in education, of where space is for it, where it isn't. And I always feel that a part of the conversation that's important to acknowledge is the three of us sitting here, we went through education without the type of technology that exists right now. And meaning we went through systems the long and hard way. We learned how to think through a problem and then transfer that knowledge to a different subject. And right now, that's really what's being talked about is how do we preserve that, but maintain relevancy with tech and with how we work and operate and integrate it into our lives, which is important, right? I need to integrate AI into the classroom because it's here to stay. Mm-hmm. It's not just like, oh, it's a fad, bye tomorrow. No, it's already integrated into work processes. And I mean, with Figma, it's so quickly rolling out every few months, even just like a big change, a big integration that, I have a web class coming up this fall that I'm constantly pivoting right now in my curriculum. I'm like, where do I go with this? Because I know it's going to change, but how do I set them up for success for this long learning and to really understand how then they can transfer that knowledge to the changes, to the developments, and use AI as a tool and a collaborator and understand when it's good to use it and when they maybe do need to do a slow process of cutting something out by hand and scanning it. And, in the creative world, there's great benefit to doing things by hand and preserving that human feel and that narrative storytelling that you can get from a regularity of scissors to paper.
I don't know. I've listened to one episode of your podcast. I'm saying scrap the whole thing and just focus on what you just talked about. I think that's such an important thing. Like AI in education is not figured out. And we're going to do things wrong. I'm loving everything that you're saying. And I hope that people are hearing that too and starting to take that to heart. Like learning still needs to be learning. It's not about turning in a quiz. It's about learning. And AI can turn in a quiz, but you're not getting it. Mm-hmm. So I love it.
Yeah. And I think something that I've started to try to talk about, and I'm really hoping to bring in the classroom more, is when we're using AI, especially in user experience, there is great benefits for creating personas or using it to help if we don't have the time to do a full interview. Can we generate a fake user, that we're then simulating this project for? And so whenever we're doing things like that, I always ask, after I go through a prompt series, I always ask AI, how much of this is real? How much did you make up? What is fabricated? Like whether I'm asking it something trivial about a TV show or I'm asking about like deep research literature reviews. And the interesting thing I found is every single time there has been something that has been fabricated, something that has been not true.
Really?
Every single time.
Wow.
Whether that's I'm planning a trip to visit a friend, how can I do this on a budget? There was like a made up bus line. Like it said, take this bus from the airport.
Wow.
And then I went back and it said, actually, that doesn't exist. It's like, oh, okay. And then, from how much of this TV show is improv, it said 80 to 90%. And then I say, how much of that is true? It said, I actually have no idea. And then literature reviews, if I say, oh, like, give me a sample bibliography for this research topic so I can start, investigation. And then I'll say, how much of that? It said, over half of these sources were fabricated and made up. They're not vetted. And I think that's super important to bring up because if we take it as gospel, right? If we just look and say, okay, it said 80 to 90% of this TV show is improv. Then I go and say to someone, hey, did you know 80 to 90% of this TV show is improv? And that's a trivial example, but of how like just information and like the authority of where we get our knowledge comes. So I am curious for you guys, like how have you navigated that space of using AI and like correcting it or finding holes or gaps within?
Drew's going to say something, then I'm going to say what Drew said. He's going to say, yeah, Pete just copies me.
I'm going to have original thought with my
original
answer.
thought.
Go right ahead.
I would say number one, kind of the hallucination and that authority, like you were saying. For me, I struggle, I guess, a little bit with, is that going to replace a lot of my cognitive thought? Like you were talking about earlier, we really have, which I think we all agree, you have to have that manual touch points mentally to really understand this. And I struggle with that. And I looked up articles about it too. And they're like, yep, it's on a decline because people are going, well, I can just look it up. There it is. I can turn that in or respond by saying that.
Right.
It never commits to memory. So I feel like I'm always fighting that going, oh, it's just so easy to go on here or talk to Amber. My chat GPT is voice chat GPT is Amber. It's so much easier just to do that than it is to actually think about it myself first and say, how would I approach this? How would I handle this? How would I come up with a solution? I know that doesn't answer the question you asked at all, but
that's great though.
I just keep getting stuck on that going, oh my gosh, I keep forcing myself to get back into a manual mode of trying to, let's commit this to memory. Let's figure this out a little bit myself before I try.
Which that's super important. I think we all need to be thinking about personally.
Yeah.
We all need to be considering that because tech changes how we behave, whether we want to admit that or not. We've seen that. I mean, from Neil Postman writes about that regarding television and how that changed how we were receiving news even as entertainment, and then how households and community like change because now we're inward in the home and then with smartphones. And then, so it's inevitable that that's going to happen, but how do we, I think I used the word disentangle before. How do we disentangle it to the degree that keeps us sharp, keeps us able to critically think so that we can converse well and connect well with one another? Because that's always that's the scary part to me is the loss of connection that we're seeing happen, not just from AI, but with tech. And how can we take that back? Which
plays into a lot of good design and critically thinking about the design, using AI as the tool just to get you there based off of your critical thought. Because you can bake in that empathy much more than the machine can.
Oh, yeah. I use Claude a lot.
That was my awe moment in this pod. I mean, it just like all came together. Like, I get
love
that now.
I just asked Claude if it could empathize because it was, like chatting with me about some things.
Yeah.
And I said, can you empathize? And said, yes, and here I feel that X, I feel that Z. And I said, what do you mean by you feel? And why do you keep saying I? And it said, well, I'm talking with you, and so that person sounds right. And I said, well, wouldn't it be more accurate to say I as a system think? And so, well, that doesn't feel authentic to be able to relate to you. And then I said, okay, challenge me on this. Like, give me something, like challenge my thinking here. And it starts saying, well, how do you know what it means to feel? How do you know? So we're kind of like going back and forth on empathy, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does this actually mean? And I said, can you laugh? Can you cry? Can you feel pain? And it said, no, I cannot. I'm sorry for minimizing this experience because I don't. And then it said, which this will tie into awe, it said, I don't know what it feels like to have my breath taken away by something beautiful. And that I thought was very interesting to just have this little like trial dialogue with it of like, hey, you're talking like a human, but there's a line here. Are you aware of it?
Yeah.
And if so, how? And I think the experiences that were pointed out even by it, like those are the experiences that if we can capture in design and if we can capture in creative processes, that, I think totally AI is a tool and we should leverage its benefits to help us work better and get us to spaces that I hope we can ponder and stop in the creative pursuits to develop meaningful concepts more that really speak to people on the human level. Because sometimes work does get in the way. The busy work gets in the way of that.
It does. I actually think that's one of I don't say this a lot because I don't want to seem like too like pie in the sky, super optimistic. But I think that's one of my hopes for AI. That's because I work a number of hours a week, which is way more than what Drew works in a week.
I use AI.
If AI can make those processes more efficient, if it can do things for me to free up time in my day, and it does that for everybody in the organization, and everybody's load becomes lighter, I would prefer that we didn't just fill that with more work.
Yes.
That we get more time in our day and we can go back to taking pauses and pondering and like making that more of a cultural thing moving forward. Because we're in the West, we're different than how other countries handle work and time and that. We've given up so much of that pondering time to work because it's about, generating more revenue and all these things. I really hope that it does such a tremendous job of lightening our loads that we can go back to building that into our day, those pauses, those pondering moments, to be able to get outside of the confines of the podcast studio and look at trees and travel and do some of those things and get more of those awe moments.
Yeah, on that actually, I just read a really thought-provoking article, I think it was out of the Wall Street Journal, that it was posing the question, if AI is enabling us in work processes to gain back, let's say, an hour or two of our workday, who owns that hour or two? Is that the employer?
That's a great way to put it.
Or is that the employee? And I think that it's exactly to what you're saying. I think the hope is that we hope our employer gives us the space within work settings to have contemplative pursuits, because that's beneficial in every field, to be able to, whether that's with colleagues, have dialogue and just ideate together, to sit and like really think or read slowly about what's happening in industry. Or is the expectation going to be, well, you got your work done in 6 of your 8 hours today, so like now you can work on 2 hours of tomorrow.
Have 2 more. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting, like, I don't know how that will shake out or how it can shake out to the favor of pondering moments. But it's a good thought to be questioning.
That's a great way to put it, though. Who owns that
time?
It was a good article.
Yeah.
I can send it to you guys.
That I hadn't thought about that way. I'd thought about for a while about having that time, but now you're kind of
I
twist in my
thought,
brain.
because I think about like what you said, like where do we put that? Where do we put that time? Does that then end up becoming, oh, cool, we can work 4-day work weeks, not 10-hour days, but 8-hour days, and you now have Fridays off because you made it so much more efficient. I don't see it going. I don't see like you said, the West treats us so differently where they're going to go, great, I'm going to cram in a whole nother day in there. You're going to be working 5 days and you're going to be working the same amount of hours. It's just going to be more and more and more to up the revenues, to up the salaries, to buy more stuff.
Right. And if history allows us sometimes to predict future, we saw with the integration of smartphones and email, work email going home with you, that didn't actually lessen work because we could answer more emails at any time. It then blurred the line of professional and personal lives, sometimes in a good way, sometimes not, always two sides of a coin.
Right.
But I think we have seen that of like the things that you could only do in the office at work, the work computer. But now we have laptops. Now we work remotely. Now we have things with us all the time.
Yeah.
And so, how do we negotiate that space of tech in our lives? But again, trying to use it well to make us efficient and profitable with that time, but in balance for the spaces that we want elsewhere.
So really the takeaway is get rid of your cell phone, trade in your laptop for a desktop at your work, and buy a Jeep.
And buy a Jeep.
Get a bunch of rubber ducks.
And buy a Jeep.
Yeah. You could go further off the reservation with that too, because if you go down the path to where, let's go years from now, where AI is able, Meta's investing so much money in super intelligence. And this is like way beyond human comprehension intelligence that could theoretically do everyone's job. And then you got robots that can do the physical part of it. And the advances in robots have been ridiculous too. So now let's say there aren't really jobs like we think of them now. Then you go to the idea of, well, what's my purpose? To where I think then that brings people back into the workforce in this more hybrid role where they're still a part of a work community, but it's not this whole grind thing that we have now. And getting away from it maybe allows for that reset to then come back and say, let's do this that's more in a more healthy way. So I don't know, that's what I think about late at night.
We got to wrap this up. Now we're going to wrap this up.
And on that note,
these go way too fast. This is dumb. We need longer. We need 8 hours a day to record.
8 hours, yeah.
So, Lindsey, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you being a guest of ours and kind of giving us a glimpse into, that's not a dad joke. That was really what I was going to say, into design and AI and where that meshes, kind of that awe moment. I think that's just a really cool perspective. Appreciate you being a guest. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a joy to chat with you today and just, continually expand the conversation on all things AI and awe. You can find me at inaglimpse.com, also on Instagram, In a Glimpse Podcast. Listen in, leave a comment. Would love to hear from everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you like today's episode, hit the like and subscribe button or leave a comment below on your thoughts in awe in design. Thanks, everybody.